This is Ritik Sarkar from Breaking the Lines, and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários. Simão a tentar oferecer o golo a Figo e a bola é golo! O golo de Figo!
Rui Costa já acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira, golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo! Bateu, golo, 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 golo! Ronaldo! Obrigado, Cristiano! Vai Éder, chuta! Gol! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 76 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. My name is Danny Pinto. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again to the pod, as this is the first pod of 2023. So again, I'd like to wish everybody a very happy new year. And with a new pod comes a new manager. And the manager is Roberto Martinez. Not the name at everyone at the top of either anyone's list or on the tip of the tongue. A surprise hire for sure for the next manager of the Seleção. And we will get into it here on episode number 76 of the Seleção podcast, as we're lucky enough to have Ritik Sarkar of Breaking the Lines. He's a contributor and a podcast host for Breaking the Lines, and he'll join us here in just a couple of moments here. But yeah, a definite surprise hire. When the name was first brought up, I think was maybe late last week, because Roberto Martinez was introduced this Monday, January the 9th, as the next manager of Portugal. A 4-year deal. It's going to run through the World Cup, which also raised a few eyebrows as well. But Fernando Gomes, the FPF president, gave his reasoning on that as well. A lot of questions that are just absolutely unanswerable if you are running any kind of PR firm for the FPF, which is, was he your number one choice? Why 4 years instead of 2? You're never going to get the real answer there, but a very curious hire, to say the least, and we'll get with it, and we'll get into it, I should say, with Ritik in just a couple of moments here. But as you guys have done in 2018, in 19, 20, 21, and 22, and what I hope you guys continue to do in 2023, please follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at Seleção Pod. You can like our page on Facebook and share our page on Facebook, facebook.com/SeleçãoPod. Email the show, seleçãopod@gmail.com, and bookmark our website, seleçãopod.com. An initiative that I want to kind of do with the show, it's called hashtag share the show. So if you are on any of your social media sites, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, send out a tweet, send out a message to whoever you think might want to listen to a show like this, who maybe isn't already. Share our social media information, share an episode, but just hashtag share the show and then tag the show on your social media, invite or just post. We'd really appreciate it to see if we can grow this thing out more and more as we've done year by year, and 2023 should be no different. So make sure you guys are doing that. Make sure if you guys are watching us on YouTube or are listening to us via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, again, hit subscribe, hit all the alerts. If you have a chance to leave a review, please do so. Hit us up on 5 stars for both Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Again, these are free ways to help the show, and it only takes a couple of seconds of your time, which we would be eternally grateful for. So We've got all the plugs. We now bring in our buddy from Breaking the Lines, contributor at Breaking the Lines and podcast host at BTL, Riddick Sarkar. Riddick, what's up, my man? How are you?
I'm good, Danny. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to get in front of the mic and kickstart 2023. Of course, with the big news we have, I'm sure there's a lot to dig into.
Yeah. So William Carvalho's role in a Roberto Martinez midfield. I'm kidding. We'll get to all that in a little bit, man. But first off, I started off the show stating that the hire was definitely a surprise hire. He's coming. Roberto Martinez is coming off a disappointing World Cup with Belgium, an older Belgium. I believe they were the fifth oldest team at the World Cup. If you want to nitpick a little bit, Argentina was the third oldest team, but they had somebody.
I wonder who.
Yeah, I wonder who. Yeah, so that could have helped them out there, but there were a lot of names bandied about who could take over. Jose Mourinho was a name that reportedly they had contacted, but according to the FPF president, they only made one concrete offer, and that was to Roberto. And he's not Portuguese. I can't call him Roberto. It's Roberto Martinez. But, what are your initial thoughts, or what were your initial thoughts and your colleagues at BTL on the hire of Roberto Martinez on a 4-year deal that will run through World Cup 2026?
Well, I can't say with any certainty whether there was much of a consensus on BTL. I know Zach Lowy had his own thoughts, being such an ardent follower of the Portugal national team. For me, the initial reaction was him. Really? I mean, because we had seen the likes of Ruben Amorim, we had seen the likes of Jose Mourinho possibly taking over, and that, put the twinkle in my eyes as like, the manager who has a great track record with winning cups, a manager who knows how to handle the big personalities, and a manager who knows how to whip in good players into shape. That's Mourinho. And with Martinez, it's almost like I think the broad scale of the current opinion on Martinez is that he failed with the Belgian national team and had a pretty dour World Cup, and that's the final word on Roberto Martinez, and I don't think that's fair. I think in a pure sum reaction, I felt that this was not the long-term vision signing that I was hoping. Well, neither would Mourinho have been. So I was going back and forth in my own head. Is that okay? This is the point I'm making, but the alternative doesn't really sound that good. I want to be hopeful about Martinez. I think that's what I want to come back to, because I believe this Portugal team that is there right now could possibly be, one of the best since maybe like 2004 to 2006, 7-ish. Of course, winning the UEFA Nations League and winning the Euros was a big achievement by that squad, but I've always regarded the squad of like the early to mid 2000s being better talent-wise.
Okay.
And I really feel like that's what this current crop feels like. Pretty much from top to bottom, you've got two fantastic, pretty top-level goalkeepers. You finally got centre-backs that are willing to come in and, punch their weight and above. You've got probably some of the best collection of young and in form and in their prime fullbacks in Portugal. Midfield is, chock-a-block full of options. Centre-forward, wait to be seen if there's someone else who can take that throne, and wingers and attacking midfielders in abundance, like world-class players. And I see Roberto Martinez as someone who can possibly do well with them for one tournament. His contract is only 4 years, depending on how he does. They'll extend it. Portugal has extended Fernando Santos through periods where, people doubted him. People didn't sort of want him to continue, yet he did. And I thought the World Cup performance of Portugal was really good. The match against Morocco, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly happened. I guess I'll come to the answers later. But long and short of it is, it's a surprise, but I can see sort of see the thinking that the Portuguese FA had with this selection.
Yeah, we're joined by Riddick Sarkar of BTL, Breaking the Lines. He's a contributor and a podcast host for that outlet. Yeah, I think the thing, I guess, like the term for me is lukewarm. There has not been, I haven't seen anybody who has said that this is a home run hire. Now, I do think that with any hire, whether it was Jose Mourinho or Ruben Amorim or André Villas-Boas, who was still available but has been now out of the game for I think about 2 years now.
I really like AVB. I think he's underrated.
I like AVB too. I liked him simply because he was available, and I don't think this job at the moment is something that you leave a job for if you are a guy like Jose Mourinho or still a young coach, a young manager like Ruben Amorim or Sergio Conceição, who just completed his 300th match as the manager of Porto and has, I believe, 212 wins was the report. So there's success there. I think that, and I talked about this in my last episode with when I had Tom Kundert and Nathan Moats, is that this job right now is it's kind of in an inflection point of where it's going to go next. You don't know if Ronaldo is going to come back. Reports are that Roberto Martinez is going to, or is already in Saudi Arabia to perhaps speak with Ronaldo. He's there to, I believe he spoke with young Portuguese players like, who was it? I think it was Andre Almeida, not that Andre Almeida, but and then Thierry Correa. And so there's, I don't know what to make of this hire, Rit. And that's the thing. I think most of us as fans don't know what to make of it. And because we don't know what to make of it, we just don't know how to feel about it. So there's not an abundance of happiness with the hire. There's not an abundance of, what's the word I'm looking for? Aspirations to, upcoming, like, win the Euros again, or in 4 years be a contender for the World Cup. We just don't know because, like Fernand Santos, Roberto Martinez's tenure towards the end of his Belgium managerial career did not go great. They bounced out of the group stage. There was an article from The Athletic a couple of days after they were bounced where there was disharmony in the locker room. There was just a very weird vibe with training camp with this last go around, and it didn't seem to me in reading. And again, I wish I would have had a more of a quicker turnaround on this episode, but I needed to find out more and more about why Roberto Martinez, what happened with Belgium. Reportedly, he had an offer in hand to go back to Everton. But there's just a lot of unknown, which makes this hire, I think, uneasy at this moment in time.
I think you made a lot of good points, especially.
Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on the show. We'll have. No, I'm kidding.
I think you made a lot of good points, especially with the unknown. But see, here's where I look at it. You made the point of availability, and I think that's huge. I don't think the Portuguese FA wants to get into a long, protracted battle to get in manager of Porto or Jose Mourinho or someone else. They want someone who's available. They want someone who can come in and influence proceedings. I think the one thing that they're really looking for is he's a current manager who managed a big national team. For better or for worse, Roberto Martinez does know how to handle personalities. And you've got to know that Belgium's golden generation didn't manage themselves. This is Roberto Martinez who managed that generation. He's the one who put Eden Hazard in the best place to succeed, surrounded him with the best people, and made a lot of, tactical calls that seemed pretty ludicrous. I remember when he first came into the Belgian side, they were reeling from their previous manager, and there were a lot of doubts saying, Everton club manager, you look at the players he's managing, Hazard, De Bruyne, all these players who became world-class household names because of their performances with Belgium, because of their performances under Roberto Martinez. He had built and fostered this system of trust and understanding where after a while they were running on autopilot. You could say that that's also where they sort of fell off. But he is responsible for that golden generation. And I don't think that's something that people should forget or take lightly. He's probably come into this thinking that he's got to build something that they can take further. I think on a broad scale, that's the part that really matters. I don't think that his time at the end of this Belgian golden generation, I think he had a problem with trust, especially in some of these new players. He did bring them in. He did play Wout Faes, but he was hampered by injuries to Romelu Lukaku, injuries to Dries Mertens, dramatic loss of form to Kevin De Bruyne, which I don't think even he expected. But he's made big tactical calls for Belgium. You know, the likes of not playing Raja Nainggolan, the things of putting in Marwan Fellaini at cam when they needed to chase a goal, putting Nasser Chadli at right wing back. All these things worked. And even though Belgium were blessed with a golden generation, what they were blessed with was a golden generation of 6 really good starting players. The supporting cast was average at best. Let's be honest about that. They were average at best. And even during the World Cup run, when they had Toby Alderweireld, when they had Jan Vertonghen and all the other likes, they're losing out on Vincent Kompany and losing out on that leader really hampered them, and something that he didn't quite recover from, and he wasn't able to tactically institute. What he has with Portugal is a huge squad of very good, very young, very talented players. And that's where Roberto Martinez made his bread and butter as a club manager. Taking those types of players and making them perform above their potential. Could he have done a better job with Everton? Yeah, sort of. But when you look at his work with Swansea and you look at his work with Wigan, exciting football played by exciting young players. Whether he still is that manager or not probably depends more on personnel than it does on circumstance. I think he has a lot to build with, and I don't think he's tactically naive, but having those conversations with young players is a good start. Having those conversations with Ronaldo is a good start because Ronaldo is not retired. Ronaldo may have gone to Saudi Arabia, but his commitments to Portugal can never be questioned. I mean, even in the World Cup, the right call was made to drop him against Morocco. I think the right call was made. It was a ballsy call, especially because it paid off when they played Switzerland. But as Martinez has said, he's earned the right for me to have that conversation with me, and I think that's a good starting point, because he knew when he took the job to become Portugal manager, the first question would have been, is Ronaldo going to be in your team? And he didn't give a definitive answer. He says, I will have a talk with him. I'll probably tell him how I'm tactically setting up. I probably will want him to be part of the side because he has a huge amount of influence in that locker room. Nobody disrespects Ronaldo. Even when he didn't start against Switzerland, the team was wondering, do we play him? Do they not play him? Do we play him? Do we not play him? It was never, we can't play Ronaldo anymore. That was never a thought that was, concrete in their head. But having him there, and this is where Ronaldo can really sort of transform to the next stage of his career. While I don't believe he wants to be a manager, he wants to play football, like plain and simple. But his influence in the locker room, his influence as a leader, is more prevalent in Portugal than it has been at any other club. He may not be able to lead from the front and lead on the pitch, but the influence he can have on a younger player to take that forward, would be great. And I think Roberto Martinez is the right person to handle, that kind of big player. Jose Mourinho, obviously one of the best Portuguese coaches, said that you'll never become a big manager until you manage the big personality. And I think we've seen that Roberto Martinez can do that. It's a short term deal that he has with them, taking them into the next World Cup, taking them into the Euros. I think the Euros would be a really good litmus test to see just how well he performs. But all talks about tactics and personnel, we don't know.
Sure.
I don't think even you can sit down and say this is going to be Martinez's squad of 16. Who knows?
Yeah, and you know what? And the one thing that us being in the States, and you hear the term sometimes. He won the press conference. When you get hired, you win nothing on the. What happens in that press conference does not automatically translate to the field. But what I will say is this: I thought he for his press conference, for coming in after Fernando Santos, for coming in knowing that the Ronaldo questions were there. I thought he handled himself very, very well. I thought he answered the questions not vaguely, but just pragmatically, and the way you're supposed to answer a question that you don't have an answer to, which is Ronaldo going to be part of it? I don't know, but I'd like to the opportunity to sit down with him. I want to sit down and talk with the 26 players that were on the roster. Am I going to play 3 in the back, or am I going to play 4? Well, I'm going to figure that out when I call up my roster, because I want to have the players who deserve to be on the roster, and then I'll make sure off of that roster, am I going to play 3 or am I going to play 4? He played both at the World Cup and at the Euros. So I just thought, just based on the press conference, I thought he handled himself very well. He seemed prepared. He seemed like he's ready to take this on. The one thing you said, which is it's a short-term contract. In international football, I think a 4-year deal is a lifetime, just because it's such a results-driven job. More so, I think, than in the club in club football, because more times than not, you're gonna get a second year unless you're an absolute disaster in club football. With international football, if you crash out or if you don't qualify, you are done. Perhaps in one tournament, and that could be fair or not fair, but that's the reality of international football, and that's what kind of raised my eyebrows raised a little bit, that he got a 4-year deal. But then it made more sense to me that he does, because again, it is a national team in flux. Pragmatically, if I could use that word again, I thought that if they couldn't get anyone that wasn't already a part of the or that wasn't already available, or they couldn't pry someone out from a club, I thought that they could probably just hand the reins over to Rui Jorge, who's the under-21 manager for Portugal, and see it through the Euros, and then either he keeps his job or you go to someone else who's then available in 2 years.
I think that sort of like youth team manager stepping up works maybe for a lower profile country or maybe club football. I don't think it has that much of a translation. And it's an interesting point you bring up, because Thierry Henry has said he's applied for the job to be the Belgian manager. And Thierry Henry was the right-hand man of Roberto Martinez. He was very responsible for the attacking makeup of Belgium that did so well at the World Cup in Russia. But I don't think that sort of like will apply directly to Portugal. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I do want to bring, we've mentioned his name a couple of times here, so I want to share something and pull something up here. Sean Gillen, who is a contributor to Portugal.net, they published this. This is just a few hours ago, and I'm going to see if I can make this more zoom in on. Come on, Danny, zoom in on this. Oh well, I'm just going to read it and see if I can't zoom in at another. But anyway, the headline is Jose Mourinho reveals Portugal job talks.
Ooh.
Now, FPF president Fernando Gomes suggested that Roberto Martinez was the first choice for the role. Gomes was asked specifically if Mourinho had been a contender for the position, replying somewhat ambiguously. And the quote from Gomes is, "What interested me from the first hour was defining the profile. We spoke within this with many people, but the only concrete proposal we made to a coach was Roberto Martinez," end quote. So after Roma overcame Genoa on Thursday, Mourinho referenced Gomes directly, and he says, "quote Today I can talk to you and say something that maybe you are not very interested in, but I want to thank the president of the Portuguese Federation. What he said made me very proud, saying that I was not the first choice, but his only choice, and that he would have done anything to get me home. He made me very happy, but I didn't go. I'm here and I'm giving my all," end quote. So
Sounds
here's
like classic Jose tactics.
and here's the thing. We've gone what seems like, about 15 years, almost 20 years of a look at me kind of personality with Ronaldo. And the one thing that I find a little bit refreshing with this hire, and again, I think Jose Mourinho is going to be the head coach, the manager, whatever you want to call him, of this national team at some point.
We're hoping so. We've been hoping for a while.
You're hoping so. Well, that's again
it's been there for a while.
Yeah, and
thought
he
has been
himself has said that it's the one job that he definitely wants to have at some point in his career, probably likely at the end after he's done with all his club stuff. But I think the last thing that this next phase of Portuguese football needs is any kind of I don't want to say star, but just a focal point. You want the team to be the focal point.
Exactly.
Amongst the roster that is put together. You want there to be obviously competency and a flair and some aggressiveness in the managing style that hopefully Roberto Martinez brings. And I'm going to bring up some stats from his time at Belgium that hopefully can translate a little bit to Portugal in terms of the attack. But I'm kind of relieved that it's not Mourinho right now. I won't mind it when it eventually does happen, but I think even though it is a questionable hire, it does not come with a lot of flair and it does not come with a lot of attention. And I think that's the last thing that the Federation needs at the moment, whether Ronaldo comes back or not. But I do think that the combination of Ronaldo at the end and then Jose Mourinho coming in to start his job and wondering if those two could have coexisted for maybe a year or two could have been an absolute circus, good or bad. So I'm kind of relieved at this point that it wasn't Jose Mourinho, even though, according to him, he was the first and only choice for Fernando Gomes, the FPF president.
That's a bit to unpack, and I think you're right in the sense that we don't want Mourinho for right now because, for better or for worse, and people will not like hearing this, Jose Mourinho doesn't play modern football. Jose Mourinho plays Jose ball, and if the players will subscribe to that philosophy and do what is needed, they will win. And you've seen it with his time at Manchester United. You've seen it with his time at Tottenham. You've even seen it at his time with Roma. Is that his style of football requires some very specific characteristics from players, and that can be sort of counterintuitive to the kind of squad Portugal have, which is a squad that needs to breathe, it needs to live, it needs to sing, it needs to dance for it to be the best that it can be. And under Roberto Martinez, you might get that in the sense that we've seen a fair few leaders, emerge in this Portugal national team. The least of not whom is Bruno Fernandes, but you also have the likes of João Palhinha, you have the likes of Ruben Dias, and others in the team who can, even Bernardo Silva, can provide that either the vocal leadership or the lead. Do as I do, not do as I say. And those type of leaders will have a greater degree of influence towards the whole game. You talked about making the squad the star, and it's more likely to happen under Martinez because he will give them that agency than it might happen under Mourinho. Whereas Mourinho might need, squad generals to be there. Martinez just needs pillars of support, which will be able to shoulder the shortcomings of maybe some of the younger players, or maybe in the bad darker times,
Yeah.
they can be the people you depend on. And I think that's what you might get with Mourinho in this Portugal setup. He is someone who knows how to manage national team. He is someone who knows how to competently manage a national team. Um, whatever his last two tournament results have been, he's been a good and competent manager. So his credentials shouldn't be scrutinized that heavily. It all comes down to
It's just not a flashy hire, and that's why people don't know how to react to it. That's why people are dogging the hire. And again, I was initially against it because it didn't do anything for me. I'm like, okay, Roberto Martinez, I'll pass, because I knew that there were bigger names, maybe, or just names I prefer. It's a hire that isn't a Portuguese manager, which for whatever reason a lot of people have trouble with, because there's never been a manager who's won a World Cup or won a title for a country that wasn't their own. Well, eventually that's going to end. That doesn't mean, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't.
I find that argument a bit silly. I think in modern football, where we're reaching with more universality of tactics and implementation, I don't think that that's going to be more of a problem. It's more of a nationalistic ideal, and I think we're going to see a change in the sense that, well, Luis Felipe Scolari was inches away from winning a European title with Portugal.
No, you got to bring that up, bud.
No, I mean,
Well, you got a grease jersey under that thing, or what? I'm kidding.
It was the second tournament I ever watched. It was only when I watched start to finish with my granddad. It holds a special place in my heart. I'm still salty about it. Because we used to have clippings of Luis Figo from the newspaper. We'd take him out. Anyways, that notwithstanding, I think it is something that will change, and I think more managers will do it. Like I want a non-English manager for England. I think England are on the cusp of that. Hopefully it happens. Who knows?
Oh, poor Gareth Southgate.
Yeah, I mean, and it's an interesting figure you bring up, because you look at Gareth Southgate, a man who managed, it's sort of going contrary to what I'd said before, but someone who had managed the younger generations of players.
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
a manager. But he had no expectation when he came in. His expectation was just don't suck. Don't be Roy Hodgson, just don't suck. Now, when you contrast that with Roberto Martinez has one thing that Fernando Santos didn't have to deal with. He does not have the baggage of a Portugal side that had never won a national tournament. For both, Fernando Santos already won the Euros and already won the crucial Nations League. And I will say crucial because you mentioned it before, how much that win matters. And it does, because it was against the best of Europe and they won. But it's important that will not be the thing that is the sword over his head. The sword over his head, proverbially, I don't think it's a sword. It's more like a butter knife, put to his cheek.
A spork.
A spork. Yeah, that is taking this Portugal team and taking them further, because we want to see Portugal in the finals. We want to see Portugal, consistently take the best of Europe or the world toe to toe. And I think that that's something that is a realistic expectation for Roberto Martinez. It's not, we're putting you in there. You gotta win the Euros next. He could. He's taken Belgium to a third place finish. And I do believe that, with the right amount of the right amount of push for these Portugal players, he needs to come in and make some of the players in certain positions really start achieving on a pretty consistent basis. Center forward and center back. You and I talked about this at length before on the Road to Qatar podcast for Breaking the Lines. These are the two sort of positions in the Portuguese national team which need the deepest reinforcements. If he can get those right, and he has shown he can get that right, Romelu Lukaku became Romelu Lukaku because of his performances under Roberto Martinez for Belgium. He has never played more prolifically for any other footballing side than he has for the Belgian national team. And he played everywhere. And Roberto Martinez empowered him to play everywhere, whether it was on the right wing creating play, whether it was, even sometimes with his back to goal, whether it was leading the counter-attack, whether it was being the fox in the box that he needed to be. Lukaku did all of that, and he did that because Martinez gave him the agency, because Martinez gave him the belief. And I believe that Martinez can have that influence on more players, especially in the Portuguese team. The likes of Gonçalo Ramos, Andre Silva. These are the players who need to step up and be the starting caliber players that Portugal can depend on game in, game out, especially against the bigger teams in the tournaments. They need to foster that winner's mentality, which we had, that Portugal had when they won the Euros, when they had players like Nani, when they had players like João Moutinho, when they had players like Carvalho earlier. And it's an important thing to foster, and it's an important thing to get right from the beginning.
Sure.
And if Roberto Martinez can impart that level of, I have the belief in you, I'll do whatever I can to help you succeed, but you got to know your opportunities aren't infinite. And
yeah, absolutely.
And if he can do those things right, Portugal have a very, very sunny outlook for the next couple of years.
Yep. We're talking with Riddick Sarkar of Breaking the Lines. He's a contributor for Breaking the Lines as well as a podcast host. Riddick, I sent you a note on the screen there while I'm about to give the dossier for Roberto Martinez here. But 80 matches at the helm of the Belgian national team, 56 wins, 13 draws, 11 defeats. He was hired on August the 1st, 2016, so shortly after Euro 2016 had ended. In the 2018 World Cup qualifying, 10 matches, 9 wins, 1 draw, 43 goals, only 6 against. In the World Cup of 2018 in Russia, won all 3 group matches. Belgium came from behind, down 0-2 to Japan. Came from behind to beat Japan 3-2. They beat Brazil in the quarterfinals 2-1. They lost to France in a match that a lot of people thought that Belgium outplayed France, but just didn't get the result. And that was actually his first official loss with Belgium since his first match against Spain, which I believe was a friendly. So
that's a run and a half.
Yeah, a bit of a run. Yeah, it was a run. He almost went 2 years without getting his first official loss. They ended up finishing 3rd in the World Cup, beating England in the 3rd place match. In the 2019 Nations League, as we've discussed, the 2019 Nations League that Portugal won. By the way, thank you. I'm just kidding. It was so fun to win 4 years ago, and now it's like, all right, Nations League. I just don't think the Nations League is being used how it should be, but that's besides the point. 3 wins and a loss. Missed out on the Final Four due to goal differential to Switzerland. Switzerland ended up losing to Portugal in the semifinals, but finished 2nd in that group. In the 2020 Euro qualifying, 10 matches, 10 wins, 40 goals, only 3 given up. They are the only European side, as I kind of bring in the 2022 World Cup qualifying. They're the only European side, Belgium was, to win their qualifying group in each of those qualifying stages. 2018 World Cup, 2020 Euros, and 2022 World Cup. They're the only European side to win and finish first place in their group to qualify. That's something that has not been the case for Portugal in the last few qualifying phases. They finished second in the European qualifying for 2020. Had to go to a playoff for 2022. I'm trying to think back in 2018. I think they.
Which was the one where they had that Zlatan versus Ronaldo match for?
That was 2014.
That was 2014.
That was 2014. But again, it's oh my god, yeah. But it's a hell of a memory. But I guess what all that to say, and again, they bowed out in 2022 in the World Cup. They obviously beat Portugal in the round of 16 in the 2020 Euro. Ended up losing to France. I believe in the first 3 tournaments that Roberto Martinez is at the helm, at the Belgium helm of Roberto. It's late here on the West Coast. You guys are going to have to forgive me on that. Yeah. And I'm not editing any of this out. They eventually lost in the knockout stages to the eventual champion of that tournament. They lost to France in the World Cup in 2018. They lost to Italy in Euro 2020, and they lost in the second incarnation of the Nations League to France in the semifinals. So, is that coincidental? Likely, but they did get to stages of tournaments where, yeah, they were ranked 1, and they were ranked the first. They were ranked 1 for a long time in the FIFA rankings. The FIFA rankings are what they are. They're a bit of
The vibes.
a misnomer, but again, ranked number 1. If I will say this, if Portugal is ranked number 1 for as long as they were, as Belgium was, Portuguese people and Portuguese fans would be like, hell yeah, we're number 1. But a trophy through all that never came Roberto Martinez's way. And that's the thing that is going to, I guess, be the legacy of this golden generation for Belgium, is that a trophy was never won. And it's fair, but it wasn't a disaster. You know, a third place finish in the World Cup is not a disaster. Quarterfinals in the Euros, probably not as far as they wanted to go with the team that they had on paper, but again, not a disaster. The disaster came in 2022 when it just kind of ran its course with this group and with Martinez at the helm. And all things do come to an end. For me, the Fernand Santos era was something that should have ended about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Yet the way that they lost in the quarters in the World Cup this go round, to me, wasn't as painful as 2018 to Uruguay or 2020 to Belgium, or the, you know, coming up short in these group stages against France and Spain and Serbia at home. Those are the ones that sting, that were stinging the most. So, a little bit of what Roberto Martinez is about in terms of his record and what he accomplished with Belgium. And again, he's not a sexy hire. He's not Mourinho. He's not a Portuguese hire, but I think he's far from inept. And I think what the Portuguese fans need to do, myself included, we got to give this guy a chance.
Yeah,
and I'm looking at the European qualifying for 2024. This group, you and I could coach Portugal and win this group. Okay,
it's a great starting test then.
I mean, it's Bosnia Herzegovina. They're ranked 57th. Slovakia, they're ranked 54th. Iceland, 63rd. Luxembourg, who we always seem to get, poor Luxembourg, they're ranked 92. And Liechtenstein, 198. Portugal is ranked 9th. Okay? On paper, this should be a cakewalk to go to Germany in 2024.
And it should be a great chance for Roberto Martinez to try out all the different tactics and things that he
100%. 100%.
He couldn't have asked for a better run of games to do that.
And I also think, because again, the question is why 4 years and not 2? And again,
you don't give someone like a national team job, especially for Portugal, for 2 years.
I don't think you do it. I don't think you do an outside, a quote unquote outside hire. I think you do that if you want to bring up the coach that is in your pipeline already, to see if it's a 2-year caretaking job, which could have been the case for Rui Jorge, is a lot to ask. But again, 4 years versus 2 years. Is there a lot of time there to establish what you want to do? Maybe, maybe not. But again, this is such a weird point in the history of this national team where, it's not only Ronaldo. It's, is Pep going to come back and play in March? Is he going to outlive us all? Rit?
He is,
I mean,
he is.
So it's a very interesting time, and a time of uncertainty for sure. And maybe you do need to give. Maybe you do need to give whoever it was, whether it was Roberto Martinez or not, maybe you had to give the new manager the 4-year deal to see what it is that can come from this next generation of Portuguese players.
And I think one of the things that when Roberto Martinez was first announced, went through my mind has he coached anyone in the squad before? Who's going to be that touch point for him? And then I realized, well, there's no one, and that's not a bad thing. Because he can imprint upon them a new set of ideals. There's no one who has a pre-existing relationship or understanding with Roberto Martinez. He has everything to build from. It is a clean slate for him. And I think that's the best way, that's the best situation for him. And he's not someone who comes with a reputation of being a tough man to deal with. He's not someone who comes with the preconceived notion that this guy is a weak tactician. He's not good with the press. He's someone who knows how to handle himself. He's someone who knows how to be calm. And he's someone who knows how to make decisions when they need to be made. Will they come off as the winning decisions or not? Time will tell.
Sure.
But he has made more right decisions than wrong. And he's made it in a much greater ratio than I think people are giving him credit for. And as you've rightly pointed out, this is a great run of fixtures for him to have. There are a lot of good young players that he can depend upon. And one of the things I want to break upon is that when you talk about Belgium's golden generation, you talk about it as such an outlier because the Belgium domestic setup does not produce the stars in such numbers that the Portuguese setup produces. It's not something that exists. The phenomenon of so many Belgian players playing in the Premier League is a new one. And it's something that fostered within itself amongst the other teams slowly till it reached a crescendo where everybody in the top six had a Belgian player. It's something that was both the perfect storm of talent and opportunity that came through. Whereas in Portugal, you have so many great young players who are constantly coming up. Benfica are having a great season right now, especially in their domestic league and the Champions League as well. You have this crop of great Portuguese talents that are coming up. They're playing abroad as well. The pipeline that they have is a greater pipeline than what Roberto Martinez was afforded. And does that mean he'll have more to select from and be able to make the right selection? I can't tell. But when you have more tools, you're more likely to make a better product.
Sure.
And I think that with that at his disposal, Roberto Martinez is fed on scraps. Like when you see Swansea, when you see Wigan, when you see Everton, when you even see Belgium, he had to work with one solid core of like 5 or 6 players and a decent starting team. He was never afforded the kind of depth that Portugal have at the moment. And it's a great opportunity for him to evolve as a manager. Whether or not you want him to evolve as a manager while he's managing your national team is another question altogether. But I think maybe Portugal need that change in direction. After Sanchez managed for a decade,
it was from 2014 till December, so it was a little over 8 years.
Yeah,
which is unheard of in international football.
Yeah, it felt like 20.
Believe me, we know. At times it felt like it was never going to end.
Yeah, so when you take that into context, that's like 4 years is enough time for Roberto Martinez to imprint upon himself what he wants this team to do. And I think he has the skills. I think he has the chops to do it. And, while we're talking, I'm more and more convinced that this is a very interesting and exciting appointment that Portugal have made. He's a man in his 50s and he's bald. That seems to be the prerequisite for playing good modern football. So,
Pep's going to love him then.
Pep's going to love him. And I think he keeps Pep around. And I hope Pep goes into like coaching or management when he decides to retire in like World Cup 2050 or whenever it is. Because again, him and Ronaldo, they're the last of the summer wild. They're the old boys. And Roberto Martinez will be smart to keep them in the loop whether or not they're playing week in, week out. And Pep's still playing week in, week out at the club level, and he's not slowing down at all.
No, not at all.
He's a fantastic model to both players within his national team as well as defenders in Europe. He is a bona fide star. And Roberto Martinez will afford those players respect. Again, he'll give the latitude to the players who deserve it. And there are a lot of people who deserve it. It's up to these players to perform their expectations. And I believe the World Cup was sad for Belgium in the sense that, yes, this golden generation was dying, but it's not like he didn't give opportunities to people. There were a swath of people who had, roles to start in, which, didn't materialize. Yes, depending on Eden Hazard was a big mistake that people could have seen coming from miles out. But when there is someone who has that magic, as we saw with Gareth Bale in Wales, you have to just try and play them. He knows what he's good at, so he kept playing them. And he didn't expect Lukaku to be injured as long as he was. He didn't expect Kevin De Bruyne to be that bad. He didn't I mean, Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen, you could have seen coming from a mile away, maybe put Wout Weiss in more. But I don't think these are mistakes that are going to be made again. And
let's hope not.
And I think that's something that is pretty clear, that Martinez's tactical evolution shows that he is learning from his mistakes. Maybe he makes new mistakes, and that's fine. I think making new mistakes is a great thing as a manager because it helps you refine your process and come to a situation where the parts that are making up the machine are running on clock more and more every single time.
Well, the one thing about the hire that does excite me, and I'm gonna go back to, and again, it's qualifying. So, Portugal is not one of those teams that doesn't get a favorable draw only to make it tough on them. I feel that the European competition or the European Championship to me is harder to win than the World Cup, simply because the amount of quality teams in Europe in a smaller tournament makes it a tougher tournament to win. But when it comes to qualifying, once you get past those first 10 to 12, it does become slim pickings for everybody else, trying to qualify. And, I mentioned, Liechtenstein is ranked 198th and Portugal has them in their group. But what I'm trying to get to is this. The thing that excites me about Roberto Martinez is 43 goals in 10 matches in the 2018 World Cup qualifying, 40 goals in Euro 2020 World Cup qualifying, 25 goals in 8 matches in 2022 World Cup qualifying. His team score goals and they don't give up a lot of goals. If I'm doing the math real quick, 6 and 3, that's 15. 15 goals given up in roughly 28 matches. So if he can get the team to score, and this team, one of the biggest criticisms of Fernando Santos has been that he has not taken advantage of the firepower that this team potentially can produce on the field. If he can get this national team to score and then to defend, because the quality of defender I still think is there, although when the eventuality of Pep retiring does happen, I think those are huge shoes to fill, and that middle of that defense is going to feel his absence. But if they can play offensively to a higher level than they have before, then I think that this team could make a run in these tournaments more so than they have in the last 2020 in the last 3 major tournaments, the last 2 World Cups and the Euro in 2020. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely agree with them being able to make a run. I think he is cognizant of where their weaknesses are. I think Roberto Martinez, when he took this job, he is someone who isn't shrewd, but he is pragmatic. He might be boring, he might be practical, but he is aware of the realities that exist and how to fill in those positions. Belgium didn't have a bunch of centre-backs who could take over from the aged players. That's why he had to play those aged players. Could you argue that he could have blooded in, some other younger defenders? Yeah, he could have. But in qualifying, the defenders that he had were flawless performers that you wonder how they had such a bad showing at the World Cup. It's something that we won't have answers for, and I think that's something that we have to just accept. When and if Roberto Martinez does find his players that he relies on, he will depend on them with his life. And I have no doubt in my mind that he will find those players in Portugal, especially in those defensive and attacking positions. And that faith in them will make them better players. I think for players who may have a checkered history or a lackluster form guide with their clubs, could be given a new lease on life with Portugal national team under Roberto Martinez, and that faith will make them better players. especially at the national team, faith goes a long way.
Yeah,
Because you're
100%.
because you're not playing, every week with the national team. You're playing, once every 2 months, once every 3 months. And yes, it is tough for the manager to come in and institute, that tactical understanding. But when he has the faith in you, the player will themselves know, okay, this is what the manager needs, this is what the team needs, this is how I need to apply myself. More things will start coming more quickly to more players. And that's how a national team becomes a championship winning team. When the players instinctively know what it is that the manager wants, they instinctively know how those tactics can help the team. And it's very, very important that Roberto Martinez puts in a system into this team that all these players can buy into. He's not someone who's tactically inflexible. He's not someone who's known for this real structure of attack, real structure of defense. This is how a number 8 plays his honor. He is someone with fluidity. He is someone with practicality. He is someone who knows how to get the results when it's needed. Yes, it hasn't come in the most recent tournaments, but there is enough evidence to show that those work. And I do believe that under Portugal, they will work more than they won't. It's just a matter of getting that core of players right. It's about selling them a product which they can buy into and believe in.
Yep. Okay. So I want to, because you're a bit of an encyclopedia when it comes to players and everything. So let's play a game here, and I'm going to let you be the one that plays it. I'll just ask the questions. What I want to do is I want to go through a 4-4-2 lineup, just because as much as I would love to see Portugal at some point play 3 in the back, we haven't seen, other than Pep and Ruben Dias, another center back who has
really
and with all respect to Danilo has been the third guy. I don't think he would be the third guy or need to be the third guy. And so with respect to playing 3 in the back, I think we eventually may see it. But for this game, I'm just going to go with and ask you this question, and I'm going to go position by position. Does Roberto Martinez have a better player now in Portugal, or was his better player in Belgium during his tenure? And I'll ask it this way: at goalkeeper, is it Courtois or is it Costa or Rui Patricio? Who's the better goalkeeper that Roberto Martinez either has had or will have?
I mean, it has to be Courtois.
100%.
I would say Courtois has been, over the last 10 years, the best goalkeeper in the world.
Okay, at center back. At center back. For me, Pep is one of the center backs. But do you take Ruben Dias, or do you take an in prime during Roberto Martinez's time at Belgium and in prime Vertonghen or Alderweireld? I mean, he got company at the end, but who would you put, I guess, in your pairing of Pep?
I would put in company. Honestly, because the kind of leadership figure he was, Belgium had a vacuum.
Can you imagine Pep and company in this in the? Oh. Listen, I'm a Spurs guy, so I saw prime Toby and Jan, and I loved watching that. But company at City and Pep at Real, those two were bad dudes. Those two were really bad dudes.
And you need that. You need that. They're both leaders. They're both bald. Bald centre backs just function on a different plane of understanding, whether you're Rio Ferdinand, whether you're Jaap Stam. they're just built different.
Does Roberto Martinez have a better right back, at least option, with Portugal, or did he have it better with Belgium?
Oh, Portugal for sure. Belgium had a absolute mess of the right wing back situation, which was a pervasive problem for Roberto Martinez's entire tenure.
And I would venture to say probably he's got it better right now on the left back too. If Nuno Mendes is healthy, of course.
Yeah, we really hope that he does make a good recovery.
All right. Again, so the back 4, 3 Portuguese players and Vincent Kompany, and then we have Courtois in the back. So that's our goalie and our back 4 so far. Our midfield, we're going to go with 4 midfielders. How many of the midfielders do you think would be from his tenure his 6.5-year tenure with Belgium, and how many of those midfielders is he going to be currently coaching going forward? Give me your 4 best.
This is a tough one. So if we're going from right mid, left mid, center mid, right?
And I'll give you even more time because I'll just tell you right now, it's Ronaldo and Lukaku up front.
Okay, that does make it easier.
Yeah.
So
okay.
if we're going for a winger, and maybe not a number 10, given how his positional fluidity was at the peak of Belgium's powers, I would put Eden Hazard at left mid.
Okay.
I think he played there when he was at his peak powers at Chelsea. He tended to stay more to the left, whereas Marwan Fellaini sort of anchored that third man in midfield along with Axel Witsel and either Aisha Nangolan or Axel Witsel. So you have Eden Hazard on the left. In the center of the park, that's going to be difficult because my favorite current Portugal midfielder is not someone who starts for the national team. At present,
You love João Palhinha, huh?
I love him.
I know.
He's such
I know
a
you.
good guy.
I know you do.
He's such a good guy. But taking it that way, I think in his prime, I think really, if you had to look at it, you'd have to pick 2 CMs. I don't think you could go with a CM and a DM because I don't think Belgium had the luxury of having a defensive midfielder. And yes, Portugal do have players who can play that role, like William Carvalho or I would say Kevin De Bruyne has got to be one of the central midfielders. I think he played more at central midfield. You could put Kevin De Bruyne on the right. I don't know where you would fall into the situation. I think
Could you have Hazard on the left, De Bruyne on the right, and then Bruno and Bernardo in the middle?
I think you could have that. Yeah, I'm just looking at that central midfield where, he had those different players. I guess Bruno and Bernardo just are better all round and tactically than whatever he had at Belgium. Whereas Marwan Fellaini was a monster at Belgium. Witsel was a monster when he was fit and when he was in his prime. Nainggolan in the earlier days. You can't say. And Dembele, we should not forget for Belgium.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In his prime was something else. But it probably is going to be Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva. And that's not a midfield I would like to start with. It's a bit lightweight, but yeah, that's definitely good enough. So you have Hazard, De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, and Bruno Fernandes up front. Ronaldo and Lukaku. I can honestly see Ronaldo and Lukaku working pretty well. One tends to be more on the right side.
Well, that's where your beef comes in. What you lack in the middle, those two could really do a number on someone. But
yeah,
I guess the reason for the exercise, Rit, is Roberto Martinez inheriting a better squad now than he did at any point during his 6.5-year tenure with Belgium?
I think he's inheriting a squad who he can imprint upon a lot better. I think that's the PR answer that Roberto Martinez will also give. There's more potential in this side for sure.
Sure. Lastly, man, before we let you go, and really appreciate your time coming on episode number 76 of the Celeson podcast, as we're discussing the hiring of Roberto Martinez as the next Celeson manager hired for the next 4 years. One of the players that he will be likely coaching as soon as probably the qualifiers in March for the Euros is João Felix, and he made his move, a loan move from Atletico to Chelsea. As of this recording, which we are recording on Thursday, he made his debut with Chelsea today, played all of 57 minutes, was actually doing great, and then all of a sudden, he slid in a little too high and got himself a straight red, so he'll be out for the foreseeable now. But today's match notwithstanding, what did you think of the or what do you think, I should say, of the loan move to Chelsea for João Felix, and what it could mean for his club career going forward?
Well, I'll put it like this. One of my friends said, you can leave Simeone, but Simeone won't ever leave you. I think that tackle was not something he did at Atleti. He let someone else do that. He challenged for the ball, he lost it, and he tried to win it back, as any good attacker should do. He mistimed it, and it was a rightful sending off.
Sure.
The timing, the context, all of it makes for a terrible read. I think it's odd because I feel for João in the sense that whether you cast your mind 2 seasons back when Atleti won La Liga, he had such an influential role to play both in midfield and in attack. And I think Simeone is sort of just winding down on his tactical abilities, that he's trying to just have this Atletico team run on autopilot. And Felix needs more attention. He needs a little bit more freedom. And I don't think it was a marriage doomed from the start. I think there were things that Simeone thought Felix could do, which after a while, it just didn't seem like a relationship that was going to work out. At Chelsea, he had a bright start to this game against Fulham. Was constantly making runs, constantly looking for the pass. He obviously got a very rude awakening to the welcome to the Premier League tackles, shirt pulls, but he didn't throw his toys into the pram. He got up, he did it again. He knew it was coming again, and he got fouled again, and he got up and did it again. I think that's a really good attitude to show for your first game in England. And it's terrible that he will miss these next 3 games because he doesn't have that many games. Because all Chelsea are left with right now, the Champions League, where they have a dodgy tie versus Dortmund, which I don't really fancy them to play really well in. And they have these rest of these Premier League games where, well, Chelsea have to do something. They're 10th right now. And I think your viewers will kick out of this. They're not even in the top 4 of London, let alone top 4. Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, and Fulham are all ahead of him. The only London clubs I think they're ahead of are Palace and just about, and I think West Ham. I don't think there are any other London clubs. So that's a very grim reading. And had he not got sent off, he would have had a lot more time to imprint. I don't think it's a good loan move per se, in the sense that Felix needs that centre forward ahead of him. He needs a Luis Suarez. He needs a Diego Costa. He needs someone in that Chelsea side who he can build for, who will be there to be at the end of his crosses, to be at the end of his build-up. He can't be that number 9, and Chelsea have made that mistake because they already have a player like him in Kai Havertz. But I think Felix will relish the opportunity and will want to stretch his legs and prove that I can do it somewhere else. He's done it for a whole season, won the La Liga. He did it with Benfica, and he has a chance to do it with Chelsea. I think it's not a well thought out move, but the options were very little. I think Atletico have done a great disservice in the way that they've sort of structured this loan. But he's a good player. He's a great player. He's a great attacker. He's very versatile, and he's very adaptive. And I think Roberto Martinez will love those kind of players. He loved Lukaku. Dries Mertens would be, a pretty interesting parallel to draw. Someone who can play wide, come in, cause havoc, occupy defenders, so that someone like, a striker, pick your poison, for Portugal will be able to really benefit from. And I think that Martinez will give him the opportunities, but Martinez, I believe, if he's playing Felix, will have a role for João Felix to play. And I don't think he'll give him that much width to, stretch his legs, because Felix has to realize that right now, he won't get the freedom to be a big fish in a small pond. He's playing at Chelsea. He's going to be playing at Portugal. There's going to be expectation out of him. Whether he gets pigeonholed as a left winger or a centre forward, wait to be seen. But I think there'll be a time where Felix has to commit to a certain position and play style, and I think that will be good for him. It'll help him become a more dependable, rounded player, and it will help him train specifically to be impactful in certain regions. I think Felix has a lot of energy and a lot of ideas to do a lot of things, but when you put him in a track, when you put him in a certain tactical framework, you will bring the best out of him. It won't come quickly. It'll take time, but bringing the best out of João Felix will be imperative, because in him I do see the future of the Portugal national team, as I do see it in players like Gonçalo Ramos, as I do see it in players like Rafael Leao. It's going to be not paramount that he gets that right, but getting Felix right will make his life a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think for me the move is, he goes from a club that gave him nothing but frustration, and again he couldn't at times stay healthy long enough to make a contribution. But I just wish he was going to a situation that was a bit more stable for him, so that he could have some steady footing on trying to get this next phase of his club career going. But you saw it in the World Cup. If given the opportunity, the kid's got star potential written all over him, and I think that he's definitely one of those players that can kind of be looked upon as one that maybe you grow this next phase of the Portuguese national team. Maybe not so much around him solely, but him being one of the pillars, and that's a word I think that's been used on this podcast too. He could be one of the future pillars of this national team if used correctly and given the opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see, man. But Rit, we've really appreciated your time and your expertise and just your thoughts on the hiring of Roberto Martinez as the next Portugal national team manager. If I haven't given your Twitter at all during the interview here, you can follow Riddick on Twitter at RITWIKJSARKAR. That's Riddick Sarkar. Again, a contributor for Breaking the Lines, a podcast host for Breaking the Lines. Hopefully more and more of Rit coming your way via Breaking the Lines in the very near future. But all the best to you, my man. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, and I hope 2023 treats you very, very kindly, dude.
You as well, Danny.
And and for the YouTube audience, can you just do the thing with the lights that you did before we started recording?
Hey Google, turn off Steve.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, Steve's gonna take a nap, and I think we are too, as it is almost midnight here on the West Coast on Thursday night. But again,
as we brave for the rain that's gonna come upon us.
Boy, let me tell you,
God help us all.
I'm telling you, there is no drought in California anymore. That is for sure. But all the best to you, man, and we'll talk soon. And that was Riddick Sarkar of Breaking the Lines. He was kind enough to join us here on episode number 76 of the Celestone podcast. And again, we have a new manager, Roberto Martinez. Let's see what he does for us. As March the 23rd is the first match, I believe, against Liechtenstein. That match will be at the Alvalade in Lisboa. So we'll see who will be called up. We still got about 2.5 months or so, maybe about 2 months before the call up. But yeah, interesting times. A new era of Celestone football coming your way, and Roberto Martinez is at the helm of that. We'll see what happens with that in the next 4 years as he is signed through World Cup 2026. That will do it for us here on episode number 76 of the Celestone podcast. We are a proud partner of Portugal.net. And as always, Força Portugal!